everyone and welcome to another video that is focused on people who are not only too lazy to read words, but who are also too lazy to look at pictures. In other words, today we are going to explain the first issue of the CZECH comic. In the past, people enjoyed when we dug deeper into the Easter eggs in the Lux comics. However, there we covered the issues only when something interesting happened in them. For example, how Silas forced Jarvan to eat a rat. But because not every issue had mind-blowing stuff in it, we had to skip one of the Lux issues. And that led to a lot of people asking, why did we not cover that issue? So this time I won't make that mistake and we will cover every single issue, no matter how much content there is in them. And let me tell you, the first one is packed with a lot of hidden information. So let's get right into it. Starting with the cover art, we can see all the main characters of this issue. We have Zed, Akali, Joven Tao, Kayn, before his corruption by the way, and Shen, with Jhin looming over them. Who I understand is there because Jhin is gonna lure in a lot of readers, because let's be honest, Jhin is one of the more popular champions in League, but at the same time, showing Jhin here is a little bit of a spoiler. But let's get into the comic itself. The first page reveals the map of Ionia. Now, this would be nothing new to us, was it not for the new locations which we can't actually find on the map on Universe. If we zoom in on the Zion province, which is where the story of Zed takes place, we can notice 3 new locations: Thongs, Huln, and the Allgret Forest. But notice that even though Jhin was on the cover art, the map doesn't show the Tula prison, which is where Jhin was imprisoned. But besides these new places, the first page also has a short introduction. It quickly mentions the Noxian invasion, and how one certain criminal found himself at a crossroad, which takes us into the story itself. The very first page of the story reveals Zed without a mask. This scene takes place in Huln, which was shown on the map. Here, Zed thinks about an Ionian saying which mentions that even though your mother gave you life, it is your master who gives you purpose. And therefore, a student who betrays his master is nothing but a worm. And of course, Zed is thinking about this before the statue of his master, Master Kusho. Now, some of you who have good memory when it comes to details may think, hang on a second, this is Master Kusho? And you know what? I'm on the same boat. See, before I got into the lore of League, I hated reading. It could be because I'm dyslexic. But I clearly remember a moment from my childhood that made me regret not reading more books. It was a moment when my grandma returned from the second Lord of the Rings movie. And I remember her saying, "This is not how I imagined Gollum when I was reading the book." And that made me think, wow, I'll never have a moment when my imagination is shattered by an artist. Because I don't read books. But hey, years later, my imagination was dumped on with this very statue. Now, I'm sorry I made you listen to my childhood story about my grandma watching the Lord of the Rings movie. But the point is that the written story described Master Kusho as a man with a huge mane, by which they mean he had long hair. Sure, after they imprisoned Jhin, the story mentioned that Kusho's hair turned white from all the horror, but still he's supposed to have long hair. Unless this statue pictures him long after that, when balding got the better of him. Either way, Kusho doesn't look as cool as I imagined him. What is cool, however, is the demon he's standing on. This is the Zogao demon, which is a brand new name to us. And because he's standing on a legendary demon which he banished, we can assume that he's holding the Spirit Blade. Because remember, Master Kusho was the Eye of Twilight, the leader of the Kinko Order, and the person who banished the Zogao. These are the main reasons why Master Kusho was so famous. The next scene reveals that Zed and his group were hired to kill Althon, who is Master Kusho's nephew. Behind Zed, we can notice his team. As Zed told his team that he's gonna fight Althon alone, we can see all of them grouped up, saluting with a special sign. We can see Joven Tao, Kayn with concealed weapon who at this time should be Rast. But notice how small his corruption is. Unlike what he looks like in-game, here Kayn isn't nearly as corrupted as he's supposed to be. You can only see a hint of the darkened corruption on his left hand. But because the cover art revealed that Kayn already has Rast in his hands, we know that there has to be something that will push the corruption forward. Maybe this is something that will reappear later in a future issue of this comic. Either way, we can see a person who still looks like Ren Shadowblade, and I still believe that's him, or her. And there is also that one person who looked like Vayne, but that is not Vayne. And besides these, there are 2 more characters which we don't know. But after that, Althon finally arrives. And yes, he looks a bit like Thanos. But funnily enough, he called Zed Worm, which is a reference to the saying which Zed revealed at the beginning of this story. He is a worm because he betrayed his master. Interestingly enough, Althon also reveals a bunch of new names. In fact, he revealed that in Ionia, names have a totally different meaning. Even though a mother usually gives her child a name, that child will probably get a different name depending on who it is. For example, just like how in Shurima slaves get their slave names because they are not worthy of proper names, in Ionia people can get peasant names. And Althon reveals that Zed's real name when he was a peasant was Govos. That is who Zed really is. But here we also learned that after Zed became a ninja, he was no longer a peasant. And so Master Kusho renamed Govos to Yusen. And after Zed attacked the Kinko monastery and he betrayed his master, Zed, then known as Yusen, renamed himself to Zed. Althon also revealed that Zed's group are called the Yanlei. That's not what they are really called, but similar to how Govos is a peasant name, we can assume that Yanlei is a word similar to betrayers. But anyway, enough about Ionian vocabulary. Althon was never as strong as Master Kusho, and so Zed had a pretty easy time killing him. But an important little detail is that after Althon dies, which by the way happened right before the statue of Master Kusho, which we can see here in the background from a different angle, Zed and the others walk away, leaving the body just laying there. Then the story cuts to Shen, who is currently in the Olgath forest, which again was shown on the map. So you can see that Shen and Zed are not too far away from each other. Anyway, here Shen is fighting a spirit. And I love how the comic writes the spirit language with characters we can't read. Not only in the speech bubble, but also on the parchments on the spirit. It's a really cool detail. But anyway, using the spirit blade, Shen easily banished the spirit. After which, another known character arrived. This time it is Akali, who remained in contact with Shen even though she left the Kinko long ago. Akali explained that she knows where Zed is. She saw Althon's body just laying on the road, and she was able to track Zed down. Then she asked Shen to join her, and she told him that even if he doesn't join her, she's going to hunt Zed alone. After that, the story cuts back to Zed. Now they were in the Qual Tavern, near Thongs, which again is a place shown on the map. Here Kane mentions that they should have taken Althon's spear, they could have sold it for money, but Zed replied that they are no thieves. But then both of them were interrupted by a woman who was sent to deliver a message to Master Zed. However, we don't learn who sent her. The message was revealed to be a spirit-touched scalpel. After that, the woman left, and they were interrupted again, but this time by Joven Tao, who was now angry inside the tavern. They refused to pour him drinks for free, so he threw a little bit of a tantrum. After all, it was them who saved this town from the Noxians. If the Shadow Ninjas didn't drive them back, all of the nearby towns would be burning, and everyone would be dead. So of course he felt justified to want free drinks. But Zed simply told him to put the poor man down. And Joven obeyed. After that, Zed quickly acknowledges his team. He is aware that all of them are just boys. During the invasion they lost everything, and so they became warriors. After this, Zed had a closer look at the message, and he inspected the scalpel that brought him memories from the past. And this brings us to a flashback from 9 years ago. Here we see Zed and Shen, both of them still being young members of the Kinko. Here we learned that Shen's father, who is Kusho, together with a different father, arranged Shen's marriage with a woman we don't know. I don't think this detail ever comes back, but it is cool to see that Shen was supposed to marry someone. Either way, this quick chat about his potential marriage was interrupted by a massacre. Remember, these were the times when Master Kusho together with Shen and Zed were hunting down the Golden Demon, which in the end turned out to be Jin. The stories always pictured how brutal Jin was during his murders. He always liked to chop people into pieces, usually with sharp razor blades, but the story never actually mentioned him using roses for decorations. As far as we know, all the flowers and roses are in Jin's mind, and these flowers usually represent blood. So even though here we see a pile of corpses covered in flowers, those flowers are probably blood. And you're supposed to imagine how brutal the scene is. See, if you remember the story of Shen and Zed, you know that Zed turned dark after they hunted Jin. And that's because while they were hunting Jin, they had to closely inspect all the murders, and so they couldn't avoid watching all the horror. The thing is that the story never went into detail on how brutal the murders were. But here the comic finally shows us. You can see that the village that they are in right now was burned. However, we learned that Jin set a fire around the village so that people couldn't escape, and they were forced to watch other people's burn inside the main inn. What's worse, some of the people survived, and the next page shows us the outcome. I would like to not get entirely demonetized, so I will censor it a little bit. Essentially, we have people buried in rubbles, horses buried in rubbles, people covered in blood crying naked on the streets, and we have people mumbling nonsense, such as "it was a flower, it was a flower, it was a flower." But more importantly, here we see Kusho. And yes, that's supposed to be his hair before Zed. I still wouldn't describe this as a big puffy mane. I was imagining something like Yasuo maybe, but sure, let's call this bun long hair. Anyway, it took them a few hours, but they were able to bring all the survivors into a building that was still standing. There they had a chance to heal them. As you can see, Zed was already working on a patient, but Kusho told him to leave him be and to go to the next one. But Zed realized that if he stops now, the person will die. This was the balance of lives. Let one man die and save 3 others. And so Zed gave in. He didn't want to do it, but he just bound the man's wound and he went on to the next one. The previously shown scalpel is the tool Zed used to heal people. During the last part of this scene, Zed was forced to cut off the leg of a person to save them. He had to do it manually with a saw. Again, I like my monetization, so I will just not show this at all. But after all of this was over, you can see how mentally exhausted Zed was. And here we get another thing revealed. As Kusho approached him to calm him down, and to tell him that he did really well, because he understood the lesson of scales, how letting one life be can save many others. After that, it was revealed to us that Kusho chose Zed to become the next Eye of Twilight, because Zed did better than Shen ever could. And after that, because Zed wasn't a peasant anymore, Kusho renamed Zed, who was called Govos at the time, to Yusen, which brought tears to Zed's eyes. Now, interestingly enough, we all know that Shen will become the Eye of Twilight. But Shen will become the Eye of Twilight before Zed attacks the Kinko. So in the future, there will have to be another point in the story where something happens, and Kusho goes back onto his decision, and he picks Shen as the Eye of Twilight instead. And I wonder if maybe that is the reason why Zed goes mad inside the Kinko monastery. And maybe that is why Zed kills Kusho in the end. But anyway, the story then goes back to present days. Here, even though Zed's team was expecting to find a rich man, Zed already knew that it wasn't a rich man who invited them here. The place where they stood right now were the ruins of the Kotha village, which is where the flashback took place. And just like it was in the past, there were mutilated bodies in the village. 2 of them to be exact. But the comic doesn't show us what they look like, because I assume it would be too brutal. And that's because, as the person who we assume is Ren Shadowblade mentions, a demon turned their faces into some kind of a horrible flower. After that we learned that Zed knew who these victims were. One of the bodies was the body of the woman who gave them the message. The other body was the body of a woman Zed met 19 years ago. It was the one his master commanded him to cut off her leg, in order to save her life. Even before he recognized the bodies, Zed knew the infamous Golden Demon was back. Kada Jin returned. And that's where the issue ends. I have to say, Jin looks a bit more fragile than usual here. He looks very thin. Then again, he is supposed to be thin. Even though this is only the first issue of the comic series, there was a lot of information in it. First of all, if this person really is Ren Shadowblade, my theory of this person killing this person later on became even stronger. Because remember how I said that the blades that Ren Shadowblades has in Legends of Runeterra are very similar to the blades that Joventau has? And therefore Ren Shadowblade may acquire them by killing Joventau? Well, notice that Ren Shadowblade here does not have weapons at all. So I really do think that he or she will pick up the weapons of Joventau later. Also, remember how I mentioned that Zed and the team were hired to kill Althon, and that they were specifically told to leave the body on the road there? I do believe that both of those were set up by Jin. I believe that Jin hired Zed to kill Althon, and to leave his body there, so that Shen would notice and Shen would hunt down Zed. That's how Jin could group both of them up and take them both down. The last thing worth mentioning here is that the story where Zed and Shen start working together on hunting down Jin. You know, the story where they met in a tavern, and they talked about how the Golden Demon returned. That story is likely taking place after this issue. During that story, Zed approaches Shen, and he tells Shen that Kara Jin returned. Up until that point, Shen didn't know. So what is likely happening is that here, Zed learned that the Golden Demon returned, somehow he will probably escape this encounter, and then Zed will go looking for Shen. Because only together can they take him down. That is all the information we got from the first issue of this comic. What's cool is that we have 6 issues in total. And I can't even imagine what's going to be happening in the future issues. My prediction is that Joventa will die, so that Ren Shadowblade can get the weapons, Kain will reveal Rast, and he will get corrupted later, Zed and Shen will work together to hunt down Jin, but Jin will escape to Piltover, because we know that Awaken is supposed to be a future reflection of the stories, and Jin is supposed to be on his way to Piltover. So in total there are 3 storylines that should be in this comic. But with that is going to be it for this video. I have already talked about too much about pictures. And Riot just revealed an insane amount of skins on PvE. So you know we have to do an episode of Rift News. I mean, there are 16 skins on PvE. 16 skins! With chroma versions. And 2 ultimate skins. Hold on to your wallets, people. Christmas ain't even close. Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other league facts and stories? And did you know that we have neat mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.